Good morning and good evening, everyone. Welcome in Salesforce ApexHour. My name is Amit Chaudhary. I'm the founder of the ApexHour, and today we are going to talk about the introduction to the Salesforce community. And today's speaker is Phil. He's the Community Cloud MVP. So let me hand over him for his introduction. Phil, stays up to you.
Hey everyone, good morning and good evening. This is my first time on any of the ApexHours, so really happy to be here. Just a little bit about myself. I work for 7 Summits. I run product management there, and I've been working on the Salesforce platform since 2010. I'm a Salesforce MVP, very honored to be an MVP. I'm 18 times certified, and possibly the thing I'm most proud of is I've written a few books on Salesforce that have been received very well. Those are Practical Guide to Salesforce Communities, which came out just last year, and then Practical Salesforce Development Without Code. Don't worry, I love code too, but that one was for declarative development, and I just wrote a new edition that came out actually just a couple months ago, so it's brand new, hot off the presses. And Amit, I'm ready to go when you are, unless you had anything else you wanted to add.
We are good.
Great. All right, very excited to have you guys today. I did scan through some of the ApexHours content, and I know that definitely you guys do go fairly deep on the technical side sometimes, which is awesome. Today we won't be going too deep. We're not going to be looking at, doing a lot of custom development for communities or anything like that, but really applying a foundation to an understanding of communities and hitting on some features that I think are very valuable for anyone who's interested in building communities. I've been building communities for a number of years, really since they were first introduced, back when our only options were tabs and Visualforce, which was not pretty, but that was all we had back then. Things have come a long way. So we're going to talk through, going to give it an overview, really hitting home concepts of communities. And then we're going to dive into some highlights. And then the best part is live demo. I always like to do live demos, so I'll try to leave as much time for that as possible. Let's dive in with an overview of Community Cloud. So I think the first thing to ask yourself is, when should you consider communities? There are a lot of people that have been working in the Salesforce ecosystem for many years who haven't touched it. And that was me for the first few years that I was working first as Salesforce admin, and then a couple years as a consultant. And sometimes it just depends on what your company is doing, and you may not be using communities, so you might not touch it. But I would encourage all of you, and if any of you guys are builders, developers, admins, to consider how you might be able to use it at your own company. So look at this. Here's some things you should ask yourself, or what you should consider when you're thinking about if communities are relevant to you. Critical use cases involving partners, customers, or employees, right? Any of those that could be formed digitally through an online experience are a great fit. Subpar online use cases that could be enhanced or streamlined. So maybe you have an old portal right now that basically everyone complains about, or is just not meeting the needs of your customers or partners. That's something to consider. And maintenance current systems is burdensome, complex, and restrictive. So it's hard. Integrations are hard. They take a lot of time to maintain. I mean, some of the newer tools make it a little bit easier, but having your Salesforce data always immediately available, not just from a performance perspective, but from an access perspective and a building perspective, that you can access any Salesforce data with ease, it is a tremendous benefit. And when you add new fields and all that, great, everything's available. So those are some things to consider. Some questions to ask yourself. Do you guys currently use Salesforce? I assume probably everyone here would say yes. And do you see a benefit in interacting with your customers, employees, or partners more closely? Would enabling certain use cases within a digital experience be valuable? And last, would increased insight into your customers, partners, employees' behaviors drive additional value. This one's pretty important. If you think about it, it's one thing to just facilitate a use case, but it's another to think about that data and the exchange. What is happening between your organization and your partners and customers and even employees that might give you further insights to drive your business? That's key. That's something at Seven Summits we think about a lot, is really looking at those interactions and then trying to drive your business further based off of that. There's a screenshot of the Hulu community, which I've been fortunate to work with them on. Let's talk about some high-level use cases before we get into any specific features or anything like that, to help you think about where this might come into play. Ideas or feedback. So you want to get feedback from really anyone. This could be employees, customers, or partners. A community is a great way to do that. E-commerce is obviously a perfect fit. For those of you who aren't aware, B2B commerce, previously Cloud Craze, leverages communities. That's how access is granted. I actually used to work for Cloud Craze, so I'm pretty familiar with it, but communities are a great fit for e-commerce. A student or alumni community, that's also a great fit. The whole concept of the 360-degree view of a contact fits in perfectly here. With the student or alumni community, there's tons of integrations. You can't get away from that. But having that central student record in Salesforce provides a lot of benefit, especially when you have a community. Self-service and support, that's really, I would say, the bread and butter of communities. I mean, that's the most common scenario is, allow your customers to get help or support for services or products. So that's a no-brainer. Employee collaboration and a partner portal. So those are high level, but again, this is just to get you thinking about, right, when might this be used? So again, some of you may be using communities, or you're about to, and maybe that's why you're on. Some of you may not be using it, and really just trying to get you to think, hey, it might be relevant for you at your company. So something to start thinking about. Let's take a step back, and I'm going to provide a visual concept of a community here. Within your Salesforce org, you have a lot, right? You have certain data, metadata, logic, functionality, processes. All this lives within your org. Well, then you have, let's say, these can be customers, partners, let's say, who need access to some subset of this. So we talked before about use cases. The use cases are really key here, because we're not providing, when we talk about communities and especially external access, we're not providing customers and partners access to the org. And we'll talk a little bit about access in a minute. But we want to identify, what are these use cases? What are they trying to achieve? What's the data they need? And with communities, what we can do is really create a unique experience. This is where the value comes in within communities. So rather than, if you think about your own experience within Salesforce org, sure, you can control what apps a user has access to, you can control fields, all that stuff. We're going to take it to a different level within communities, though, and say, this is totally branded as much as you want it to be, and we want just to focus on these particular areas and kind of strip everything else away. And that's what you can do with a community. You can bring into play most everything from your org. I mean, there are some apps and things that may only work in Lightning Experience or Classic that you would have to essentially rebuild in communities. But all that data and logic, all that, automation, you can harness that within communities as well. So this isn't like you're going off to the side and having to build everything from scratch, including the data, logic, and all the back-end pieces. You can harness that really to the extent that makes sense for your community. That's where the real value comes in. So again, solving use cases, and we're doing that through creating a community experience. And for those of you who, I'm sure most of you guys are on Trailhead and probably have many more badges than me. That's the little logo there. That's kind of the main community icon that is used on Trailhead. To take that a step further, if we think about what makes up a Salesforce community, I would look at it with three main prongs, three aspects. One is probably the most obvious, website and user experience. What does it look like? What does it feel like? The branding, all that. The second piece is what I was just talking about, is business data and processes. So it's not just this front end skin. There's a lot behind it, and that's whatever is in your org. Third is the social and collaborative aspects. Yeah, definitely chatter is a huge piece of that, but it can be more than that depending on what you want within your community. So these three together really create what I would describe as a community. Another thing to consider is, when you think about products like Sales Cloud or Service Cloud or Marketing Cloud, those have specific scope. There's definitely some overlap. I mean, if you subscribe to Sales Cloud, yeah, you get access to cases, the case object. But the point is, it is a finite amount of functionality that you basically get as part of that product. With communities, you have to think about it a little bit differently, because communities are they provide this experience on top of whatever else you have. Again, if you have, let's say something that is from Marketing Cloud that's in the actual Marketing Cloud experience in the front end, you can't necessarily replicate that directly within communities without custom work. But something like if you're building out a journey or something in Marketing Cloud and you can leverage community data, or you can have something occur in the community that drives the journey experience. And same thing with Service Cloud. You can take, I mentioned before about self-service being such a key piece of that. You could absolutely create an experience for that in your community. So, from a licensing perspective to objects and things like that, then that might be facilitated through Service Cloud within your org to handle, for your service department or customer support. But in terms of how that's presented, that you can create whatever kind of experience you want within a community, which is really nice. Talking about licensing and user types is something that I think is pretty valuable, because not everyone realizes this. If you think about who can access what, if you take a look on the left here, we see an internal org and a community. Now, keep in mind, the community really is inside the org, but I've just separated it out for this illustration. If you have a standard license, you're an internal user and you have a standard license, or employee licenses. Most licenses that can be applied for internal users automatically grant access to a community. So that's something a lot of people don't realize, is that, let's say you have 500 licenses for your company, for your company's employees. If you created a community, you have access to that. There are no additional license costs that you need. Now, to provide authenticated access to an external user, that's where additional licenses come into play. And I always stay away from talking about any pricing or anything like that. That changes frequently, and I'm definitely not the person to ask about that. That'll be your AE, your company's AE. You'll want to talk to them. But the external licenses do not provide access to the community. They provide access directly to communities. Now, another nice thing is that when you're providing this external access, like customer community, there are basically three main licenses. There are a few additional ones, but I'll just mention these today: Customer Community Plus, and Partner Community. Those are external, so they're not going to be able to log into your internal org at all. They are less expensive, as you would imagine, and they provide different access. So I'll show you that in a second. I think that's the next slide here. On the right, this is an illustration. Some of these are from my book, and I just pulled them straight out of there, and I'm just talking through these. You can see a lot of times the way communities are discussed is in the context of customers, employees, and partners. And that is typically you will have one of those audiences being the primary audience of your community. But keep in mind, there is nothing to prevent you, and I mean technologically or anything legally, from combining different groups of these. You could have a customer and partner community where you want partners to interact directly with customers. You could have a customer and employee community. You could have all three of those groups in one community. So while those sometimes are labeled in this way, customers, partners, and employees, it is important to understand there's nothing to prevent you from combining those if the use case warrants it. So that's to help you break out of the box and maybe not see it in such a structured way. Yes, most commonly it will be, but it doesn't have to be that way. So I mentioned partner community, customer community plus, and customer community licenses. Let's talk about what those actually provide you with. So if we look at, let's start at the top right here, customer community, baseline standard objects, custom objects, access to knowledge, chatter, activities, and tasks. Now, with knowledge, keep in mind, you still need the knowledge license on the back end for whoever's administering. This isn't a way to get around that need. So you still need to pay for whoever is an admin of knowledge. But there are some key areas that are missing. I said baseline standard objects. So that implies that not all standard objects are included. As we move to Customer Community Plus, you can see there are two main areas that are opened up to those licenses: reports and dashboards and advanced sharing. I will tell you, but out of all these scenarios, the most common need, if we start with the cheapest, most basic license, which is customer community, most common need we hear about is advanced sharing. Salesforce has created what are called sharing sets to allow for some control over access in customer communities, but they are inherently, customer community licenses are inherently different from customer community plus and partner community. That's because customer community users do not have roles, which is a very big deal. So think about whether it's using sharing rules or Apex managed sharing or anything like that, or even manual sharing, you can't apply that. So anytime you get into a scenario where there's some content, some data, and you need to have granular visibility, control over that, make sure that a unique set of individuals can see it, and it might change over time, and you might have certain individuals at one company who can see it, certain individuals at another that can as well, but maybe some of the employees can't. Those are scenarios where you need to get into, you need to at least get customer community plus. So it's something to think about if you're ever building a community. Just keep that in mind, because that's something that would be a critical miss if you got into the build and realized that you had talked to a client and and you recommended customer community, but they needed something more powerful than that. And then at the partner community level, you get everything from customer community plus, but also what I'll call premium standard objects, which you may think of as just standard, well, I'm being redundant with that term, with maybe foundational objects like leads and opportunities. But I would tell you to think about it from a Salesforce point of view. These are the core. These objects are the core of Salesforce CRM. leads and opportunities. They're extremely valuable. Without those objects, there are many use cases that are not possible. Obviously, there are infinite use cases that still are, but without leads and opportunities, you can do a lot less, especially in the context of communities, especially like a partner community. So leads and opportunities are enabled there. So just, you want to think about that when you're building out a community. Another area that's pretty interesting for those of you who haven't built communities before, if maybe you've kind of played around in an org and you're trying to create a community user, something you might have noticed is that, if you think about a standard user, you go to the users menu menu in the setup menu, and you say new user, right? You create a new user, you select the license type, the profile, and you create the user. And if you've ever tried to do that for a community user, you would have had a problem. That's because you can't create a customer community user or partner community user in that way. And let me explain why. So on the left here, we're looking at a data model that is very different for customers and partners, or I'll call them external users, and employees or internal users. When you create an internal user record, you create a user. That's it, right? You create a user and that's done. When you're creating a user for let's say again, an external user, that user record must be associated with a contact. There are many reasons for this. The primary reason is, you think about the whole point of what you're trying to achieve by providing access to a customer partner. They should absolutely be a contact in Salesforce. It really wouldn't make sense if they weren't. And there's a lot of data that you will keep at the contact level that wouldn't really fit at the user level. A user record is intended to provide access and identify who that user is, but there's a lot that can sit at the contact level. So the way to do it is on the right. I walked through this. So this is for customers. It's a little bit different for partners, but very similar. Basically, you go to a contact and you'll go to the Lightning Actions menu, click the drop down, and you will enable this customer user first. And then you will create a customer user record. And you'll save. And then you'll notice what's interesting is on customer community records, as you would expect based on this data model, when you're on a customer user or external user record, you'll see there's a field contact with a lookup, and you can click on it, it'll take you to that contact. On a regular user record, that field is not there at all, so you wouldn't see that. All right, as we keep going here, again, we're talking about members, permit, profiles, licensing. To take it one step further, this is something that comes up a lot around login versus named user licensing. So I get asked, what's the difference? Why would I pick one or the other? How does that work? Okay, so at a high level, I would tell you, we just talked about customer community and customer community plus and partner community. Now, for each of those, you have two choices. So you may say, customer community licenses fit what we need. Great. But now you need to decide, do you want customer community user licenses or customer community login user licenses? Let's talk about that. So Salesforce, this is a very good thing, although it may be a little bit confusing if you're just used to provisioning Salesforce licenses for internal users and you don't think about it. Now, suddenly I've thrown 6 different licenses at you, and there are actually more that you can get. But when we're talking about login versus, I'll call it named user, the point here is this. In your community, when we think about authentication, right, if it's we're talking about unauthenticated access, just pure guest user access, that actually doesn't require any licensing. FYI, you can go and create a community today that is public with no authentication, and there's no cost for your company. Now, keep in mind, there's a limit on page views per month. I think it has been 1 million per month up to this point, but you can do that without any licenses, which is kind of cool. Another thing a lot of people don't know. But when we talk about authentication, which is where a lot of the value comes in with Salesforce, you want to look at it one of two ways. Are you going to have users that are coming to your community and logging in fairly frequently, or do you anticipate that this is something the users will come to and log in infrequently? Maybe they only need to come twice a year. Well, that creates a problem if you only look at licensing in the standard way. So to create a named user license for somebody who logs in twice a year versus somebody who logs in 20 times a day, it's a much different usage pattern. And Salesforce has created the login user licenses to account for that. So what this chart is showing is basically what's the sweet spot for named user versus login user. And now the prices may change over time, but at least at the time I created this graphic, it was essentially at about a 3-to-1 ratio, meaning once you anticipated a user to log in at least 3 times a month, you should provide a named user license for them. So there has to be some assessment of that. There is no magic tool that automatically switches them. There is an app on AppExchange, I think, that allows you to maybe see and manage that, but it's still not, there's nothing like automated that would go in and just that maybe is a good app to build. But you have to manage them yourself. But what you would do up front is say, well, maybe I anticipate half my user base to log in infrequently, half of them to log in frequently. Great, you can get half named user licenses, and then you would want to get the appropriate number of login licenses. So just to be clear, if I have 1,000 users, that doesn't mean 500 named users and 500 login users. Each login user is literally a login. So it would be more like, if we're talking about per month, and we're saying 2 logins a month, so that would be 1,000 logins and 500 named users, something like that. It's really up to you guys. It's an important point, though. If you're ever building a community, you want to think through this. And then just something to be aware of for any of you that were around with portals. The way that they were structured was totally different. And one annoyance for a lot of companies was that you couldn't have the same login for multiple portals. You would basically have to have a separate user. That's no longer the case. So you can have up to 100 communities in your org. I have never seen anyone come close to that, and it's probably not recommended to have 100 active communities in an org. I mean, there may be a situation for that, but you might want to look at why you have so many. But the positive is you can have an external user with one license, one user, and you can provide access to one, multiple, or all communities within that org, which is very, very nice. So I showed you before that we can take different types of users and put them in one community. This is a little bit of the inverse of that, where you can take one user and put them in different types of communities as well. So the current framework allows for a lot of flexibility there. To wrap this piece of the presentation up, if we're talking about why communities, I want to make sure it's clear. Unique experience. I'll show you a little bit of that in a minute. Focused use cases, that's huge. Reduced per user cost. I have this in here, but really, if you think about it, you're not going to give a customer an internal license. So it's not like you really have a choice there, but it is reduced per user cost. So when you're thinking about users, it's not the same price as your internal user. So that is something to consider. Access to Community Builder, which I'll show you live in a minute, which is my favorite tool on control over access. So multiple user types in one community or one user in multiple communities. I just mentioned that. All right, so let's shift it up a little bit. I'm going to talk about some areas, and we're going to go into a live demo. Community Builder, I'm going to show this to you live, so I'm not going to say a whole lot about it right now. Main things to know, it's WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get, and it's drag and drop. It is much more powerful than Lightning App Builder. Lightning App Builder is, as you guys know, I'm sure, I mean, it's basically you're creating a page, essentially. You're managing a page, and you can drop components on that page. With Community Builder, you are managing the front end of the entire community for a Lightning community. And there is a lot to that, much more than one page. So there's the page level piece, or pieces for all the pages you have, and then there's the community level as well. So tons going on in Community Builder. I have a graphic here that now I need to go back and double check it. It's always changing with each release, but this was from Winter 19, which is actually, that's the end of 2018. So definitely need to check out the numbers here. But then if you went to the home page, if you created a home page with Lightning App Builder, you would have 22 standard components available. If you created, if you were on the home page in Community Builder, 50. That is absolutely grown as well. So I like this slide because, a lot of us love Salesforce because it's fun to build on. It's a great platform, great tool, and it's just flat out fun. So this really highlights that, in my opinion, is you have all these components at your fingertips. And yes, again, I know it's ApexHours, and probably many of you build Lightning components yourselves, and that's awesome. But it's pretty nice to be able to have something available to you without actually having to create it up front. So that's something to be aware of. I'm going to shift off of that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Lightning Bolt, and I'll show you that as well. But Lightning Bolt it's been a source of confusion for a lot of people. I'm going to be doing a webinar in August, late August, on Lightning Bolts, like Lightning Bolts 101. If you're interested in Lightning Bolts, you should attend that, and I'll spend a lot more time on this. But for now, I just want to get these concepts clarified as much as I can in a couple minutes. Originally, the term community template existed, and I think everyone understands the term template. It's basically taking something and using it as a starting point, just in the general concept, and that's what a community template is. Taking a community and saying, well, I want a different starting point for a community. That transformed into Lightning Bolt, which essentially is a community template. It's for the most part, it's an interchangeable term. And then came along Lightning Bolt Solution, which I think, I mean, I understand it personally, but I can imagine it probably introduced additional confusion into the marketplace because the terms are a little bit, they're a little muddied, and I'll show you why in this next slide. So on this slide, basically what we're talking about here is related items that I want to try to clear these up. So when we talk about a community, if we're talking about what is referred to in the metadata API as a network, okay? So in the back end, code-wise, that's a network. Community equals network. This is the actual functional site that is accessed by whatever audience you have configured. That involves the theme, branding, pages, all that stuff, components, config. So the network is, I've created a network that has certain data, metadata, and some group of users are accessing this, okay, this network or community. Community template is different. A community template is, like I said, it's a starting point that determines a community's initial scope. The community template in and of itself is not a community. You can't log into a template. So it's basically XML definition of those elements in a community that you want to use as your starting point. And if you look in change sets, you'll see Lightning community template. And in the metadata API, that's community template definition. Now, Lightning community template wasn't supported in change sets, even though it's listed there. It hasn't been supported. That might have changed, but I haven't heard about that. So they may have quietly supported that, but that was something that it just simply failed. And they said, yeah, that doesn't really work. I don't know why it was included and not just removed from change sets, but you'll see it there, Lightning community template. And then finally, Lightning Bolt solution, which is referenced as a lightning bolt in change sets and in the metadata API lightning bolt. And that is a bundling mechanism that's one level higher than a community template. So it's basically a business marketing friendly wrapper around three things: community, a set of apps, and one or more flows. As I show on the right, custom app, flow category, or community template. It could have only one of those and you can include it. It doesn't really provide any functionality. The lightning bolt solution piece specifically, it's like a container. I don't know how much it's used. In theory, I get what it's there for, but I think it's been quietly received for the most part. So let's talk about a bolt, because I will show you what that is in a little bit. A bolt is, like I said, it's a starting point, but if we think about it less from just the technology perspective and more from the use case perspective, it is to address use cases. We talked about at the very beginning, communities are for use cases. So if you build a community, especially if you're within SI, you build a community that addresses some specific use case. Let's say what I mentioned before, like e-commerce. Okay, you have an e-commerce site and you think, you know what, this has value to other customers. We want to essentially clone this community and reuse it. That's what a lightning bolt enables. And if we look at a conceptual view here, if you take a look at within this, there's a lot going on here, but focus in on the inner yellow box. I believe it's yellow. I'm colorblind, and I always forget the color, but I think it's light yellow. It says Salesforce out of the box. For example, Napili template. That now is called customer service, by the way. But Napili template, this is conceptual. So that's where you start. You have certain pages, certain components, and some standard objects, right? Those are available out of the box. A lightning bolt solution could be essentially adding pages, adding components that serve as apps and possibly some custom objects as well, and then saying, here is my lightning bolt solution, and delivering that. And that's your starting point. So at a high level, all we do is start with the bolt, like customer service, add, remove, modify, and then we create the bolt. That is a major simplification of the process. There's a lot that goes on in step 2, of course. And this gives a little bit more detail there. Basically saying, okay, here as a starting point, I make changes, and then I end up with a new bolt, and I can export that. And I'll show you how that works today. And the last thing here, this is the lightning bolt solution screen. I mean, you guys can go to it in your setup menu and take a look. For customers, the value here is that you can leverage these solutions, use them or deploy them. And then for SIs or builders, you can build or ship using this container. Again, it's just a container that allows you, the point is really to create this cross-cloud, cross-product solution where it's not just, hey, here's a community, but it's, hey, I created this app, maybe for internal agents, a flow for agents to interact with customers, and then the community for the customers. And all of these together are a solution, if that makes sense. Let's talk about a little bit about audience targeting. I believe I was looking through the ApexHours content. It looks like there's been a presentation on that, which is awesome. So I'll go through this a little bit faster, but I think it is important and especially if any of you weren't able to see that one. So I'll just talk through it. So standard web experience is basically one size fits all. You go to a page, everyone sees the same thing. What we're trying to do with audience targeting is personalized. So you can create tailored experiences and consider members' identities. With audience targeting, here's a conceptual view of that. So there's one page, but maybe I have two versions of it. I can show different audiences those versions, and I can consider things like user details, location, profile, record type, so on and so forth. Pretty powerful stuff. And you can get very granular since you can look at user details, which is really, really pretty powerful. There are three targeting methods today: page variations, components, and branding sets. And I've highlighted, if you look at these images, I've highlighted where that comes into play. Page variations is that's the whole page. Components are, components, and then branding sets is the kind of look and feel. Basically, you can control how the header appears within branding sets. So page variations, we're basically saying here, well, maybe we have a primary page and one variation, and 2 out of 3 individuals who log in see the primary page, the other sees page variation. With components, same concept, but we're talking about we can change the configuration of a component or remove it altogether. In this case, I have 3 users. They see 3 different components in the same place because I feel like that's what's relevant to them. Finally, with branding sets, you can see here kind of some basic branding at the top. So you can control a lot of that. Let's go ahead and log in together. And I want to walk through some of this because this is the most fun part of all of what I do here. Just make sure I'm still logged in. So let's refresh here. So we're going to start here in the setup menu and just a little tip, I would like to find communities by searching for COMMU. That kind of brings up communities at the very top, and you click on all communities. If you haven't enabled communities yet, you'll just see community settings. Once you enable communities, then you'll see all communities pop up. You can see I do have a lot of communities in here. This is my own personal org, so I've created a lot over the years. When we look at, so I created an ApexHours community in advance. Now it's just a shell. We're going to add some content together, but here it is, and we're going to just dive right into Builder today. So I'm going to click on Builder, and before we get started, so what I do is I took away the standard out-of-the-box components. So right now it's very plain, not a lot going on. Like I said, we're going to add some content. But let me take a minute to talk through Builder. I mentioned before that I love this tool. If you love Lightning App Builder, you would probably love Community Builder even more. It is just a great tool to use. Let me give you a quick tour of it. On the left, we have 4 tabs. The top is Components. This is similar to what you see in Lightning App Builder, but again, there's a lot more, and the way it's grouped is really useful. So in Community Builder, they've grouped the standard components functionally or logically, so you can find what you want a little bit easier. Of course, you can just search and type something in, but like for example, if I want to find a component that has to do with records, and I'm not sure which one it is, I mean, I can type in record up here, or I can scroll down to the records section and find what I need here. You can see tons of components at a glance. Let's see, I said there were 50 before. Let me do some quick math here. 26, 28, 31, 37, 47, 53. So now there are 53. So 3 more than when I came up with that. I don't know how many are in Lightning App Builder, but 53 standard components, which is awesome, really awesome. You can use these. And then down below, you have the custom components. I have quite a few in this org. I have 87 right there. Custom components, we'll show that a little bit more later. Theme, I'll also go through this a little bit more in a minute, but this is where we control the look and feel of the community. Page structure allows you to see what's on the page. So if you have a ton going on and maybe you can't find a component or something like that, or you want to just see how you've structured the page in a list view, you can do that here. And then finally, you have control, you have settings control for the entire community. This is top level. So these are configurations that affect the community overall. Now, this is just in Builder. With communities, you can go to your workspaces. We won't spend very much time there today, but there are other things, like there are other controls that don't really affect maybe the front end experience, but do control your community overall. So you can go there and change settings. At the top, we have Page Manager. So you can see all your pages. Lightning App Builder is something similar, but it's not exactly the same. So you can come in here and you can create a new page if you want, and I'll walk through that in a minute. And then some controls over here. You can undo, redo, refresh, publish. Basically, it's important to understand with communities, you have two states, draft and published. That's all there. There's not versioning today with Salesforce communities. So you can't have a version and save it for later. You have your what you see in Builder is your draft mode or draft status. And then if you click publish, it basically makes the live status, or the live version, the published version, the same as draft. And then you can continue to change what's in Builder. It won't automatically change what is published live, but you just click here to do that. And then preview allows you to see the community as though you're logged in. So if you want to get rid of these sections, all of these are regions on your page, which is another really cool thing. You have a lot of control over that. Lightning App Builder, you have some control over that. Here you have a little bit more, and you can change, you can create a custom content layout and set up the regions however you want if you're a developer. And then when you click preview, notice they all go away. That's because, again, I'm viewing it as a live user would be viewing it. And then the last thing I'll mention is you can change view mode, which is nice. So you can go in here and say, all right, what would this look like if I want to see it on my mobile device? So that saves some time if you're doing some testing. That's a quick overview. What I want to do is actually create a little bit of content while we're together today. So let's do that. I'm going to use some custom components to do that. Before I add anything, though, I want to make a major change to the community that's actually very simple. To do that, let's go to theme. So I mentioned this before, theme. Let's go to change themes. So this is something that was introduced last year. It's standard themes. Now these are great for companies that want to just get up and running, and maybe they don't have the ability to create a custom theme themselves, or they just don't have the time to do that. This will allow you to change that look and feel to make it just a little bit nicer without spending a ton of time. So let's go with Cypress. We're going to go Cypress today. It gives you an overview of what it looks like, what the functionality is, and let's go ahead and activate the theme. I think it's very powerful to show this, because I think it encourages people to know that to get a nice looking community these days, it doesn't have the Salesforce look, is pretty simple. Again, this isn't custom and there are some limitations with it, but it's pretty nice. So let's do this. I'm just going to keep that background image for now, but let's change the content. And let's say, let's do this. Let's change collect bonus rewards, and let's put in ApexHours. and for caption text. So what we're going to do today is kind of build a very basic like ApexHours community, just since it's relevant to you guys. Up here we'll say, you know, we'll say join us every Saturday. All right, and we'll leave that. We'll get rid of that button for now. So primary button, let's show, we'll click on that, and notice this, I'm sorry, I was going a little bit fast there. This is one of the best things about Community Builder, and Lightning App Builder has this too, but as you're making changes, you're seeing the changes take place immediately. So if I uncheck show button, that goes away, and I get that immediate feedback. For layout, let's say I want to change the height a little bit, make that a little bit smaller. There we go. So now I've changed that. Let's also make one other change. Let's change the image. So it's a cypress, that's the name of the theme. Let's go ahead and upload a different company logo here. I think I have an image that will work. So I grabbed the ApexHours logo, and there we go. So now we've dropped that at the top. So we have the ApexHours logo. So we still don't have a lot of content here, and that's what we're going to do next. So we just changed the theme to make it a little bit slicker, a little bit more streamlined. So I'm going to show you a few different things. First, most important thing is just within Builder, showing you how to leverage these components. So what I'll do, I'm going to create, just so you know where we're headed, I'm basically just going to focus on the home page, drop some content on there in the form of custom components, create a page variation, and show you how that works. Also, I'm going to touch on CMS while I'm in here, and then CMS Connect while I'm in here, and then finally publish it, and then create a lightning bolt from this. All that we'll do actually in not very much time, probably 10 or 15 minutes. So if I go to, let's go to components. What I'll do is I'm going to create two variations of this page, and they'll be focused on different types of content. One will be focused on video content, okay? So what we're going to do is take a component. This is a component I actually helped build for my company. Drop that here. It's a video gallery component. Okay, it's empty right now because we haven't specified who's going or what video we want to show. On the right, we'll just, again, we're going to keep it simple today, but still enough so you get the picture of what building looks like. We will take this Twitter feed and put that on the sidebar. And what this will do is it'll show us content from Twitter for whatever account we want to show. So let's make some configuration changes. Now, FYI, the Twitter one will not show in Builder. It'll render on the live page, so it'll look blank here. So let's go here, change that. ApexHours has a Twitter handle, which you guys probably all know. So let's change that. I'm going to remove the border, and then we'll keep the height. So yeah, we'll keep the height on that. For our video gallery, I found some of the ApexHours videos. So let's grab one of these. This one was very popular. I saw the introduction to Lightning Web Components. Let's go back over here. So in this component, all we have to do is say, so we can choose source, YouTube or Vimeo, and then watch this. I pop in the ID, and once I remove focus from that field, then we can see that there. So we'll say introduction to LWC, great intro video, something like that. And we can change this as well, featured ApexHours video, okay? And you'll see that'll update as well when I click off of that, featured ApexHours video. Okay, great. So on this page, we have the main content is a video. We also have Twitter feed on the right. I'm going to publish that now. I don't absolutely need to. I can wait till later. I'm going to just publish it now in case we want to take a look at that. So we've just created some content. Now let's go ahead and create a page variation. If I click on page properties, you'll see here we have page variations here. So let's click on page variations. And I can switch between pages if I want, but I'm on the home page, right? Click on page variations, and what you'll see is one page, home, audience default, status published. Great, so that's the page we're looking at. That's all we have right now. There really isn't a variation, there's just the main one, right? So I have my home page. We can create a new page variation by clicking at the top right, new page variation. And what's really cool is we have the option of we can use a pre-configured page or start with a blank page layout. I'm not going to talk about too much today, but let me just show you. If you go to settings and developer, we'll come back here in a minute, but you can export a page. So you can create a page, export it, and then use that as a page template, which is very handy. So you come here, export it, and then it's in your org, and you can ship it to a different org. And then when you're here and you say new page variation, let's say, or you want to just create a new page, you can start with one of your exported page templates. Those will show up here. So it's pretty handy. But we're not going to use that now. We're going to say new blank page. I'm going to switch the content layout to make it a little bit different. And I am saying content layout. We're not talking about page layout. And we're just talking Salesforce terminology here. Page layout is what you all know and love and has been around for a long time, which is you go in and you go to your object and you have certain page layouts, and you can drag and drop fields and create sections and things like that. So essentially, to boil that down, it's what fields are you going to see? These are content layouts. So they have nothing to do with fields. They have to do with regions on a page. So it's different. So don't say page layout, even though, yes, I get the terms kind of overlap. If you think about your average person who doesn't know Salesforce, they would think, yeah, that's a page layout. These are called content layouts. So I'm going to, like I said, flip it over. Let's put the narrow column on the left, right? And we'll just say home to. I mean, not too exciting. Actually, let's do this home, and we're going to have blog as a featured content, and I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, so we're creating a page variation, and it'll be blank. There'll be nothing there. And now let's go ahead and add some content. So first, what I'll do is, let's see how this looks. I created, just to show you a little bit of different content. So I have a flow that includes some Lightning components that pull in some social media content, and I call it ApexHours Social. We're going to drop that in. Again, that doesn't render on the left, so I mean in Builder, so you won't see it right now, but we'll see that in a minute. And this is what I'm about to show you. It's pretty exciting stuff. I literally built this, no exaggeration, about 10 minutes before. It just came to me that I should do this, and I was able to do it from scratch in like 5 minutes. So 10 minutes before, and then I hopped on here in 5 minutes. No exaggeration. Now, when you're building it for a client, I'm sure there'll be other details and requirements that'll take longer than that. But the point is, I got this working right before, and that is, I thought I had, so I have my own blog, wineforce.wordpress.com, and I usually use that for my CMS Connect example. And then I was like, wait, maybe ApexHours has a WordPress blog. I didn't even talk to Amit about this, but I went and found it, and I was able to set it up, create a CMS connection, and I'm going to drop the CMS component in here now and show you guys that I was able to get this working, which is really, really exciting stuff. So let's get together. Before I do this, I want to show you, we'll go ahead and click publish again. There are 2 steps with CMS Connect. CMS Connect basically allows you to connect to like Adobe Experience Manager, Drupal, Sitecore, WordPress, and pull in content. A lot of customers have before CMS Connect was around, they would say, yeah, I don't know if I want to go to communities. We manage all the marketing assets in Adobe, and I don't know if I really can. We can't really switch over, or I still want to get access to that. And before it would be some crazy custom work, and in Lightning it was even harder. So Salesforce created CMS Connect so that you could bring in these specific assets. So you do that here in content management. You create a CMS connection. This takes 2 minutes. Okay, so I'll just show you what I created. Down here, it's WordPress uses JSON, so I went down here and set this up. And let me change this actually. So basically, I use this Capricorn Cafe example. Capricorn Cafe is basically what Salesforce uses for some of their examples. And so there's a good page out there. You can find this example, connect JSON content to your community. It gives you step-by-step details on how to do this. So if you have a public WordPress site, you can do this. So I set it up for ApexHours. Okay, that's the CMS connection. And then we go back into Builder. And here's what we are going to do. Let's see here. Oh, that is the wrong Builder window. So let's go back here and we'll go back to Builder. You can always click at the top left to get to your different workspaces and communities. And I anticipate, yeah, I appreciate everyone sticking around with me here. We probably have no more than about 10 minutes left. Okay, here we are back in Builder. Let's go to that page variation. So to get to that, now this wasn't here before, but because I created a page variation, you can see I have options here. So let's click on blog. And let's go ahead and add the CMS Connect JSON component. Drag and drop it. And now at first I've just selected a CMS source, ApexHours, JSON content blog list. I can skip component path. For content list layout, grid, we're going to leave default 6 items per page, 3 columns. For content list item layout, let's choose card, and then I have to enter in all this information down here. Let's see if I remember this by heart. Title, author, name, date, content, and then things as featured image. Okay, there's some small chance I misremembered, but I think that's all correct. So set all that up. I click save and take a look. Look at this. Even within Builder, we can see it. So for this page variation, we have all of Amit's blog posts on WordPress from ApexHours, which is pretty awesome, and it's dynamic. So I'm done. I put that in there. I can leave that here. He can post today, and it'll pull in the new one. I don't need to do anything else to that. It's not pulling in the data and storing it in Salesforce. So that is pretty cool stuff. The last piece here is looking at the actual page variations. Now, I'm just going to go over this briefly, but I think it's important because there is that other ApexHours, so you can definitely take a look at that. And I've done a full Pluralsight video on this as well, so you can check that out. But let's take a look. So if we go here to page variations, you can see audience. Home is default. This home blog is none. Okay, so what we would want to do, I'll just show you in theory how this works. Basically, there are 2 pieces to this. Number one is you need to create an audience, and then you need to map certain content or page variations to that audience, right? So if we go here, I can say, yeah, let's create an audience, and you have a bunch of choices here. You can say, well, do I want to use location, permission, user, profile, you know, whatever I want. So I could say, with user, you can use basically any fields here on the user record. I could say or let's say location, let's just do that. And now location, just so it's clear, location is like IP location. So this is where you're actually accessing from user. If you look at this, it would say, what is actually on your user record, of course. So maybe I say, well, if I did, I don't know, let's say country, let's say I'm just gonna make something up here on the fly. So everyone in India would be a particular audience, and I could create one for a different country as well. But let's just say, let's see, what am I doing wrong here? User country equals that, and not advanced. Oh, okay, it's actually looking, there we go. Okay, so I save that. So here's an audience right here. I mean, you can do it based on anything you want. You can do it based on title. You can do it, I mean, you can use profile, something like that. And then what you would do is essentially you can say, well, I can assign to a particular audience. So if I felt like, if you're located in India, the blog content is going to be more relevant. Then I can assign that particular page variation to that audience. So here, assign, I could say, there we go, assign, and you can see now it's assigned. And so now the way this would work is, the logic is, first going into, the default is last. So it's like, are you in this audience? Yes, then you see this page variation, else you see the default. That's basically how it works. It allows you to create these personalized experiences that are totally seamless to the end user. So they really have they don't see any difference at all. And so let's see, so I created the whole blog. So we'll do a couple things. First, I'll show you, if I go, this is the live community now, and I'm already logged in. So I go to the live community. So here's that first version. So pretty cool. We have the video, and here's that Twitter feed showing up. Oh yeah, look, there you go. There's there's the session that I'm talking about right now. That content's coming in from ApexHours. Here's a video which you can watch right from within the community, which is awesome. Okay, so then if I go back, and I'm not hooking up all of the audience targeting pieces right now with different users, but let's go ahead and change this, and let's make this the default. Let's make the blog the default, and we'll publish, and we'll give it a minute. While that's going, I do want to show you one other thing, which is lightning bolt. In reality, it takes a lot more time than 10, 20 minutes to create a lightning bolt, because you're creating some solution. But technically, you can create a lightning bolt in a minute or two. The actual creation, the export of the template takes almost no time at all. So we could say, let's see, if I go back here and watch this, let me do this real quick. If I say, let me take a screenshot of this page, okay? Now it's going to grab the zoom controls for me, which I don't really want, but that's okay. I'll just ignore those. So here's this page. I'll show you what I'm going to do with that in a minute. Let me just export that really quickly. Ooh, there we go. Save that. Okay, so now I have this image I'll use. If I'm back here in Community Builder, and I go to settings, I went here before to developer to show you how to export a page, but you can export a template too. So let's say this is, Trailblazer webinar bolt. Let's call it Trailblazer webinar bolt. So basically that's the structure of this ApexHours, and we want to create something similar for other groups around the world that they could use. Say Wine Co, category doesn't really matter. And then images, we'll just add what I just uploaded. There you go. And then summary, you know, we'll say community template for webinars, right? Features, and for now I'll just say feature one, you know, description. Okay, so I'm not really going to add details. That is the export of the template. So we built the site out. We want to reuse it. We're going to export it. I'm actually going to do that. So I'm going to actually export it, and I'll show you that in a minute. In the meantime, what I want to do once I get the, okay, everything is good, got it. Here's what I want to do. I want to go again to the home page. Let's view ApexHours community. And if that propagated, okay, awesome. So take a look at this. What we have the blog on the right, and I can click on that and go to those articles. Again, this is all dynamic through CMS Connect. And then on the left is that is a flow that I have, and I identified a couple Facebook post and a LinkedIn post that allows me to basically pull up some content from social media. So here's how to get started with Marketing Cloud. That's on LinkedIn, and these are custom components, of course. These are also components that I help work on, and then we package them up in a flow. But point is, I'm taking advantage of a lot of content within Salesforce communities in a short period of time. That's kind of what I try to do in these demos, is show you a lot and show you the power of community. So let's do one last thing here. Let's go back to setup. This will be the last thing we do today. And if I go to setup, now, if I create a new community, some of you are probably know what I'm about to show. I say new community, and guess what will be on this page? So on the top left, take a look, Trailblazer Webinar Bolt. Very cool. We just created that together. And you can see there's that image that I uploaded. You can upload multiple, and yeah, this isn't too terribly exciting because I didn't add a lot of content, but you get the point. Here is a template. If I go ahead and say get started, take a look at this. We'll say new webinar community, create. It's going to take a minute. While it's creating that, the point here is, or I should say, the scenario that you should be thinking about this is in two scenarios. Well, for some reason that didn't work, which it always does, of course. That's what happens in live demos. But let me just try that and see if that works. And that's okay if it doesn't work. I think you guys get the point. But the scenario is, either you work for an SI or a company that builds things for your consultant. You can create these templates and distribute them, or number two, you may internally, if you're creating a community, have a need to leverage some of your work and reuse that. Point being, if you're going to build a community and then other organizations internally want to use the same thing, or at least part of it, like let's say it's what you built in your first community is 80% of what community number 2 will be, well then create a bolt from it and then start from there. Don't start from scratch. That's the point. Again, yeah, not sure what's going on here. It's not anything with what I was doing, but there's something in the back end that caused an error. But what would have happened is basically you would have seen I just created a new community and it looks like what I'm showing you here, but I didn't have to start from scratch. So that's the main thing that I was hoping to show you guys today. I think the last thing I'll mention is really just thanking you. You guys can feel free to contact me anytime. I've provided my email address here. There's my Twitter handle as well. I have my book out there. If you guys really are excited and you're about to build a community, definitely I'd recommend checking that out. There are some opportunities for free copies. If any of you guys want to do a review, I might be able to get you a free copy. So you can always hit me up on Twitter or email. And Amit, I really appreciate the time. This has been a great opportunity, and I hope all of you guys got something out of today's session.
Thank you so much, Phil, for a great session. So guys, if you have any question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question directly to Phil. Okay, even I'm not able to see any question in the chat window. If nobody have any question, then we are good.
Hey Phil, just a question. Can I speak with
Yeah.
you? So,
Hey, how are you?
hi Phil, I'm good. How are you?
Great, thanks.
Great session. I just had a question about those licenses part, where we spoke about community user license and the community login user license. Could you be kind enough to elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, I heard everything except the last question. You said about licensing, and then what was your specific question?
Community user license and community login user license. What is the key difference between them? And see, currently the org which I am trying to handle has both, and we are trying to understand the licensing cost and based on the user volume. So can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just spend a minute on this. And the key pieces here when you go from so there are two main lines that you want to keep in mind. One is once you go below customer community plus and go to customer community, I mean, obviously that's the cheapest. This is, the more access here, the more expensive. So customer community is definitely the least expensive, but you lose roles, you lose advanced sharing. So you cannot have any scenarios where and you can't get around it with Apex managed sharing. There are no roles. Your user does not have a role, so you can't say, oh, I only want these very specific users to see a record. You're not going to be able to do that. You can use sharing sets, but that's about it. So that's a key difference. Basically, they're considered high volume users, customer community users, and you can have a lot more in a community than the other types. Now, once you cross that line down to customer community plus, so you get roles, so you can do whatever normal sharing you want. All right. Plus, you get reports and dashboards, so you can add reports and dashboards to your community if you want. Those aren't, unless you have a use case for that, those aren't used nearly as much as the advanced sharing when you get into that area. And then again, with partner communities, it's basically just the objects there. So you will have customer community plus and customer community users have zero access to leads or opportunities. So if you don't need those, great. And typically, like I mentioned before, those are associated with partners. You're either assigning leads or assigning opportunities to partners. That's why those are associated with that level. So that's what I would mention. And then the other thing is, again, think about your groups of users and how often they'll log in. And if you have users, double check the prices, but you anticipate will not log in more than 2 times a month, then separate those out and purchase login user licenses for them. Otherwise, you'll be paying a lot more than you need to be for those users, if that makes sense. Does that help?
Yeah, yes. So just to understand, I mean, whatever you shared right now. So let's say there are, I mean, if I'm taking a lot of time, I'm sorry for the other guys, but let's say a scenario where you and I are there. We are using a certain portal to check some of our bills, right? So let's say I log in only once a month, and you log into the community quite often. So will it be making sense if the company associates me with the community login user license, and because you are accessing the
Yeah.
community more number of times, they'll be assigning you the community, just the community user license. Is it?
That's correct. And the way it works is it basically takes so for the user who's a login user, it will take from the pool of logins. So for me, if I'm a named user, that works the way everyone's used to for Salesforce users. I'm a user, I can log in as many times as I want, doesn't matter. For you, then you have your pool of logins that you buy. So let's say you have 1,000 that month. If I give you a login user, it doesn't actually, the moment I give you that login user, it's not taking from anything. It only takes from that pool when you log in. So if you never log in, guess what? It makes no difference. But if you happen to log in tomorrow, it'll go from 1,000 to 999. So that's how that works. If it wasn't clear.
Yes, absolutely right. Now I understand it. Thanks for the detailed explanation.
Yeah, cool. And I saw Rita in the chat mentioned about using sharing sets. Yeah, and I mentioned that before, that you can provide some sharing control for customer community users with sharing sets. That's definitely the case. You just can't do advanced sharing. So sharing sets, I had to try to explain it very quickly. Sharing sets allow you to say, well, you can kind of look at a particular record and say, like you can reference a lookup and say, well, if you are associated with the same account as maybe this other person, then you can see what they see. Or anyone who has a lookup field that looks up to this contact or this account or something, then share with them the same records that are shared with that first person. So it's probably hard to explain without a diagram. I have some in my book. I have a very old blog post on that as well. I think it's still mostly relevant. If you just search for Weinmeister sharing sets, you'll probably find it. But there is a little bit you can do. It's not like you can't share at all. Obviously you can do that. You just can't make it super granular, and you can't use the Apex managed sharing and things like that. Any other questions? All righty. Well, here's my contact info once again. Thank you, Amit, for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.